Well, more now on our top story. Britain's biggest banks will not be broken up. A new report into their future has stopped short of calling for them to be split into retail and investment operations in its interim report. The Independent Commission on Banking called on the country's biggest banks to hold core Tier 1 capital levels of about 10%. It attacked the industry's bonus culture, saying incentives for excessive risk-taking must be curbed. The report also called on banks to come up with credible resolution plans and ring-fence their retail operations. Well, so has the Commission bowed to pressure from the big banks? Let's get the thoughts of my next guest. He is the chairman of Metro Bank, Anthony Thomson. Hi,
hello, Andrea.
Nice to see you. What do you think? Did the Commission bottle out in this interim report of splitting up the banks?
Well, I think they had two challenges facing them. The first related to the protection of the consumer and the stability of the market. And I think they did pretty well on that. The second part, which was about introducing more competition at the high street, I think they could have gone further.
Now, have they done enough to keep the big banks in London? Because, of course, that was the threat, wasn't it? That if they split up the banks, they would simply take their operations.
Oh, absolutely. Some 35% of taxable revenues come from the financial services sector. I didn't think there was any chance that they were actually going to break up the banks. The whole argument about banks being too big to fail, I think broke down by the fact that most of the failures that we saw were either retail banks, Alliance and Leicester, Bradford and Bingley and Northern Rock, or of course on the investment banking side, Lehman Brothers. It wasn't a universal banking problem.
Indeed. Now, what of this decision to hold 10% of capital rather than 7%? Does that make banks in the UK uncompetitive, or does it do what Nick Clegg was saying today and make this a very stable banking sector?
Well, I think it makes it much better for consumers, and if one looks at it in the context of what they're trying to do about ring-fencing the retail parts of the bank, I think it's a major step forward. Of course, as a new entrant, we had to reach that level and much higher levels of capital from the outset.
Indeed. Now, does this mean that we're going to see banks being restructured as such, or is this tinkering? I mean, obviously it's going to be a big deal for Lloyds. They've got to sell quite a lot of branches, don't they?
Well, it is interesting. Even if Lloyds have to sell another 600 branches, which has been talk of today, all the difference that makes is reducing their share of the current account market from 1 in 3 to 1 in 4. It really doesn't go far enough. Will it mean the banks have to hold more capital? Yes, it will. Will that be disadvantage to them? Slightly, but I think the advantages to the consumer, the advantages to the UK banking sector are far more outweighed.
And of course, the whole point of this is to try and prevent another banking crisis. I know this is only an interim report, but could you say, from what you've seen so far, that it is now less likely because of what's in this report?
Well, I think this whole point of ring-fencing the consumer part is very important. Added to that, this suggestion, which in fact we at Metro Bank put to the Banking Commission, that they put the depositors further up in terms of the rankings of creditors. So that the equity holders and the bond holders take the pain first, so that the depositors don't have to.
Now, of course, Metro Bank is only a retail bank, so how much does what was in that report affect you?
Well, the main thing I'm interested in is seeing more competition on the high street, more choice for the consumers.
And indeed, that seems to be what the government wants as well. So.
Absolutely, but have they gone far enough? There is no doubt that consumers, by and large, are very dissatisfied with the service that they get from their banks. Some 42% in a recent survey said they were either dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with the banks. So this has got to improve, and currently there's no real incentive for the existing banks to do what's needed.
But, I mean, the government's talked a lot about this, but what kind of incentives could have been put in that weren't put in that would actually make it more competitive and do what you're asking for consumers?
Well, it's still very, very tough for new entrants to get into the marketplace. Since you kindly invited me on your show last April, it's interesting to note there haven't been any other banks authorised since us. The authorisation process needs to be tough, but it also needs to ensure that there are going to be new entrants on the marketplace. One of the points covered today in the report was this issue of contestability. That is, ease of entry to markets, ease of exit from markets.
Now, you've done pretty well since you arrived in, and it has been. I mean, as I said, you're the newest bank and the only one around for a long time.
Almost 150 years.
Indeed,
yeah.
indeed. But what can be done to make it easier for other people to do what you did?
Well, it is a very hard process. It requires regulatory approval. I think the processes will get better. It requires considerable amounts of capital. And my understanding is that banks are going to be asked to hold more and more, and the new banks will be required to hold that from day one.
Now, things have gone pretty well for you. You've increased the number of branches that you have, but you're still very small. When you look at Lloyds selling off 600, do you look at them and think I might cherry pick a couple of those for us?
I'm always asked that question. My belief is you can't acquire your way to a better culture. You can't merge your way to a better culture. The only way you can build a differentiated bank which meets the needs of consumers and small businesses is by building it from the bottom up. It's a lot slower, but I think we get a much stronger model doing it that way.
But you are going to expand just slowly?
Absolutely.
OK. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.